Hey guys, it's Alan again, and this is My Life Unscripted. This video series I started on YouTube about a month ago, a little over a month ago, where I talk about mental illness and I talk about stigma and I talk about how it's related in my life and my friends' life and so on and so forth. This week I'm kind of excited because I get to welcome my first guest. This is my first time I have anybody to talk about this with. Many of you know who Christian Judd is. Christian, how are you?
I'm doing
Um,
well, man. I didn't know that was your first guess. You didn't lead
yeah,
with that.
I should have left. I
That's a
should have led with
sneak
that.
attack.
And I want to point out to everybody, just so you know, he's got the red behind him, the U, see, and I've got the Y. See, we can still talk, even though
We can still get along.
opposite ends of the spectrum here.
Well, plus like we're behind a screen. It's not like we can really harm each other.
No,
We
this
don't have
is
to
true.
talk about the fact that the last game that each of our teams
Hey,
played,
hey,
one
hey,
team won and one team lost, but we don't need
hey,
to talk about
don't. We and if we talk about it, I all I have to say about the Cougar Oregon game is line of scrimmage. They got beat at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. That's just what it was.
that. And I won't say anything about it
Nope,
because I'm
you're not
because
gonna
I try to be a nice guy.
you're not gonna say a word about it. um, but I got to tell everybody how we came to meet because it's that like the situation we've become pretty good friends and it's just wild how it happened. Um, so I'm trying to think. It was like a couple months ago. Um, Brian, Brian Brown invited me to go to this party at it was hosted by Bartle, right? By Steve Bartle.
Steve Bartle and Kendra Bartle.
Yep. And so I'm there and hanging out, and I get to meet you, and
Yeah,
we kind of hit it off. We became friends, and then like what was it, 2 3 weeks ago? It was the Monday after I got
it was
back
in
from
August, end of
yeah.
August. Yeah,
You came. We went to Spencer's music
Spencer
pro-
Lepre.
Spencer LePray, and
We're just name
we.
dropping left and right over here.
I know totally, but
Spencer Lepre and
I
Jake Sorensen.
yes. Oh yeah, I forgot about Jake. Yes, Jake Sorensen. Yes. So I got up and I go to get some food, and you stopped me, and we started chatting,
Yeah,
and like we started chatting about my friend and everybody's friend John English, Germs guy, and his passing and what it's done to me. We talked about mental health. We talked about all sorts of stuff. You gave me your number, and then you told me that I need to text you, positive or bad, negative,
yeah,
positive or negative. I haven't been very good at it, but I still text you here and there, but I need to be better about it. But we
yeah.
just kind of became really good friends at that point.
It's been. I
So
mean, like it was a cool chance meeting. I'm glad that you came, even if it was like toward the end of when my wife and daughter and I were leaving that party. But it was great to talk to you and get to know you and vibe a little. And it's always fun going to these places and meeting new people and having that connection. So definitely a pleasure on my end.
yeah, me too. And it was like, I don't know, I already consider you a life friend. So,
Oh,
because
thanks,
it was
buddy.
really cool.
You as
We
well.
talked a bit. But as I like to talk about on here, mental health, and you were one of the first people I thought about wanting to talk to because of the line of work you're in. So before we recorded, you gave me the whole long spiel. So for everybody that's watching,
The
the
long version.
the five viewers that'll be watching this, don't want to tell them
I'm
what
sure
you
we can get 6 for this round.
if yeah, we can get six. Maybe we should get Andy to this and then tell him he needs to like share too.
Yeah, of course.
But um, tell everybody about what you do and how you got into it.
Yeah, it's like my background, as I was explaining to Alan before we started recording. When I was a kid, I wasn't really a student. It's not that I how I had any issues with learning or the education or anything like that. I just didn't care. It wasn't heavily emphasized in my house. And in high school, I had a high school girlfriend that was very driven. She was in AP and honors classes, and she challenged me, and so I started school at Salt Lake Community College. Didn't have a lot of direction because I was a late gamer on what I wanted to do with life. eventually I figured it out, um, and ended up working in toward a nursing degree. Finished that in 2010. So I had graduated in from high school in 2000. Finally finished that part of the degree in 2010. Had a bunch of things that I just had little things I had to finish to complete my associate, and then apply to the U. Got in, did finished my bachelor's degree there, did a master's degree, decided that I wanted to keep going, and got right into a nurse practitioner program, which I explained to Alan, like, I had only worked in psych, and I had no plans of working in psych. It just kind of happened. And the way that I explained it to the program director when I interviewed for the psych mental health program at the University of Utah was that it was something that I fell into and then fell in love with, because the fact was that when I finished school, we were in a deep recession still, particularly in Utah. In 2011 is when I was licensed initially, and could not get a job working in the hospital. And there were a number of psych jobs that I had applied for and got, and was just like, okay, well, this will be something that I'll try out and do. And I started working in psych, and so you know, I I just kind of kept going, and it's something that it's become a passion of mine, and I really enjoy doing. And that's kind of like the short version of how I got here. So my only other experience in psych, personally, my dad suffers from depression, and he takes medications. He's been to a number of different therapists over the years. And then back in, I hate telling this story because it's just so back in April of 2010, I lost my brother to suicide. Um, and I always say, if I knew then what I knew now, would things have been different? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Um, but I do know that regardless of it all, because you can't change the past, that wherever that kid is, that he's happy for where I am and what I'm doing. And so I try and live on his legacy through the work that I do by helping as many people as I can with their struggles with mental illness.
So I'm glad you shared that because I know you weren't sure about it, but I'm glad because that was one of the I was going to ask. And you know what? I do this show, like you. I don't know if you've seen any of the episodes I've posted, but I've cried on a few because I've had some difficult times. And like
Yeah.
my whole point in this is to show people that it's okay to talk, that it's okay to be vulnerable, that it's okay to cry, it's okay to deal with this kind of stuff because we
Yeah.
need to be more open. So, and for those watching, yes, I was messing with the camera views and stuff, and it was probably crazy, but no, like, and I appreciate you sharing that because I like we've all dealt with it in one way or another, and we may not
Hmm.
realize it, and maybe we don't want to admit it, but we've either dealt with it or we've had family that's dealt with it. um, I was just going through today because I've spoken very openly on Twitter, on here, on Facebook about losing my friend John, Germs guy, and what it meant to me, what it meant to Devin, what it meant to a lot of people, and how it's affected me. Because I'll be honest, like it's been a really tough year for me. I've talked on here about like I went through a divorce that went final in April. Um, I was really having a difficult time. I was self-harming a lot. I was dealing with suicidal ideations. I was dipping into some dark times, and this is probably the lowest I've ever been in my entire life. And I had started to pull out of it, like end of May into June, July. I was starting to really get my act together. Into August, I was starting to feel pretty good about myself. I was starting to understand my triggers. I was starting to kind of figure out how to balance them and how to manage them, and things were going well. And then John came around
Mhm.
and happened, and I took a nosedive. And ever since August 17th, I've been well all over the place with grief, all over the place from dark to not dark. I've had a few moments where I considered a suicide again. I'm coming out of it now. Like I'm getting out of it, but I'm glad we're talking about this because
Yeah.
like today I went in and found there's another friend that we lost that the Twitter world lost 4 years ago to suicide. And his name was Colby Spradlin. I don't know if you ever knew who he was. I don't know how long you've been
I
on Twitter.
didn't like a lot of people don't realize this, but I wasn't plugged into Twitter until the beginning of the pandemic.
Okay.
Like I've been on Twitter since I think 2012,
Right.
but when the pandemic hit, I'm a social person and I'm all about, you know, staying connected to people. That's a huge part of my mental health. The positivity in my mental health is being connected to people. And so when my family locked down with the pandemic, I was just like, what the heck am I going to do? So I went to that lovely place that is Twitter. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's the beauty of it though, Alan, is like even though it can be such a toxic place, it can be such a place of beauty at the same time.
Oh
Because if it
yeah.
weren't for Twitter, you and I would not be talking right now.
Oh.
I have so
And
many great friends that I've made. And I think that like I don't want to cut you off on your on where you're going with this, but we kind of talked about that in the beginning that you wanted to address this, and I think that it's important for us to um discuss that for men in particular. And my partner on my podcast, Andrew McCullough, and we've had numerous conversations about this, that men do not stay connected enough.
no.
And that's the one thing that has been so great for me about Twitter is I've met so many close friends from that website. Yourself, Andrew McCullough, Sean Cochran, Steve Bartle, as you mentioned. I mean, the list goes on and on. Bryant Brown, Jordan Gomez, Alex Harris, Tanner Martin. I mean, I could keep going. Like people that I talk to regularly. Another guy that I just started getting close with, Ivan, who I won't give his last name to because he wants to remain private. But like all kinds of people that I've become really close to, and I think that that's missing for a lot of men, and I think that it is detrimental to our mental health. Just to you know put a cap on it, or turn the mic over to you. Um, I lost a good friend of mine this last weekend, who I also met on Twitter, Wes Pace. We had a chance meeting this last May. Like we had first met April of last year at the Utah Social Open, which is another thing that we've done to get people to gather and find friends and find acquaintances and things of that matter. But we talked here and there on Twitter, but we met in person at Lowe's. I saw him rolling in. He was coming from chemo treatment for his leukemia, and I walked up to him. I was like, "What are you doing here?" And he didn't recognize me at first. He's like, "Oh my gosh." He was there looking for a smoker. And so I gave him the recommendation to get a Pit Boss smoker, which I had gotten last year at Lowe's. I
Takes
told him, I
note.
said, dude, when you get your Pit Boss, let me know because I'm going to come help you put it together. And then that's how that all started. So, like, for the past 3 or 4 months, we got really close. And, it's kind of, it's one of those things where I, the emotions that I've gone through because of it were really, really difficult. But it's like his wife texted me I'm trying not to get emotional, dude. On
Okay,
Saturday,
you
and
can.
she said to me, she said, "Thank you for everything that you did for him. You have no idea how much your friendship meant to him and meant to me, more than you know," is what she said. More than you will ever know. And I was just like, I'll take the pain because that was so meaningful to them and what that kid needed in these last few months of his life. It's like whatever. I can handle it because it was so rewarding for me to get to know that kid. And we need that. We need it. It's so good for every aspect of our lives. So,
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. And I'm going to share a quick story because around surrounding John's death, you're right about Twitter. Like, um, the day I found out, I was sitting here in my office at work. Well, I'm here at home, but I was working, and I got a call from a friend of mine that had let me know that it had happened. And first words out of my mouth were no, 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 and I started crying. And he and I talked for briefly, and then the very first call I made was to Devin, who another friend that I've made on Twitter here, Devin Masters. Like
hmm
we close, and he and I had done the podcast with John for 8 years, almost 8 years. Um, and and we both took it like we had both had to process it, which we didn't do completely that day, but I lost it. But then I posted on Twitter, and then suddenly everybody, like, I can tell you alone in Facebook messages, texts, and Twitter DMs,
the
I had
support.
over I had over 100 people reach out, 100 people, and people that I the people that I like I cared and loved, but then people I didn't even know, and they were giving me their number, they were reaching out to me, they were talking to
Yeah.
me. I had friends like Justin, who is Justin Jazz. He changes his Twitter handle so much I can't remember, but he's he you know he reached out to me. He's like, Alan, I want to make sure you're with somebody today, that you're okay. But so many people reached out because I was on Twitter since 2009, and I deleted it back in 2019, like right before the pandemic, because I was going through problems in my marriage and things weren't good. And I lost the account. I had over 4,000 followers. I had a huge
Yeah.
account at that time. And so I started fresh this last October a year ago, and I've been building it up ever since. And I don't need that many, but like it's just it took me a while, but I've been on since 2009. And some of these people, I know everybody knows her as Cindy, but I know her as Sinead. I've known her
Mhm.
for almost the entire time I've been on Twitter. I've
Yeah, she's
known
great. She's also
Devin that.
one that's like a huge friend.
Yeah,
Cindy, like there's so
yeah.
many women too. I mean, I didn't mention the women because we're talking about like men and having that, you know, m- that male bonding. But
I,
Cindy, Emily Waters, Liz Lloyd, so many women
oh
on
no,
there. They've been so incredibly supportive of as well.
but it's just interesting. Like you know, Devin and I became close over the years, and I've known him since 2013. But it's just, you mentioned the men. Like I've had men like that day. I got texts from people like Devin had passed on my number to Sean, who goes by Ink Tater on Twitter,
Mm-hmm.
and Sean reached out to me, and Sean has
He's
been
a
one
good
that's
dude.
reached out to me ever since, and we've talked. Like I used to talk to him on Twitter years ago, but then I left, but we haven't talked in a while. So, like, you're talking about us guys connecting. You're right. Like the
Yeah.
pandemic did a number on me because I'm so used to being in the office with people, and suddenly I'm isolated. And then not only that, but my kids are gone to school. My
Mm-hmm.
ex, she's gone to work, and suddenly I'm by myself all day long in my basement, in my office. And now I'm that way even more because I'm divorced, and next month my kids are moving out, so I'm literally going to be all by myself, and it's hard not being connected. So it's nice to one go back in the office occasionally, but it's Twitter is nice because I can connect with a lot of people, guys, especially guys, but the girls included. I have a lot of friends that I've connected with, and it's been there for me. But yeah, like you're right, guys, we have to connect. We need connection, and a lot of us don't want to
Yeah.
admit to that, but we do. Um, and I don't know why it is, and maybe you can speak to this yourself, but I don't know why it is, but guys, some guys have a hard time, a lot of guys have a hard time expressing themselves too. And,
Yeah, it's a difficult thing in psychiatry and in psychology. And I think that a lot of it is in fact, I know a lot of it is the social stigma where, boys don't cry,
Right.
pick yourself up by your bootstraps, walk it off. All these like common phrases that are hammered into you from a young age. You know what I mean? It's changing now. You see it changing now. It's not universal, but it is changing because of our generation, where we didn't like getting smacked around and told,
Right.
you know, walk it off, quit your crying, you know. It's more of that nurturing because we are capable of it. But because of that, it makes it really difficult for men to reach out, to get help, to ask for it. Um, and 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 just getting somebody in to go and admit like I'm struggling. I'm having problems where I'm feeling sad most days. And there's so many different signs when it comes to depression that people just don't realize. Like feeling
Yeah.
sad is one part of it. It's a major part of it, right? But other symptoms of depression is something we refer to as anhedonia, or the inability to experience pleasure. That's like things that you normally do that you enjoy.
Right.
And some people like they try and go through that, which is huge in our culture. Fake it till you make it,
Hmm.
which you can't fake it when it comes to a major depressive disorder. It's a disorder, and you might go through the motions, and maybe you do get better, but for the most part, people just aren't. You might be flying by the seat of your pants, but it's never going to be like to the point where you're feeling good or normal. And
Right.
so, it's really hard for men to go in and you're supposed to be the tough guy and take care of all these things, and you're supposed to just shut up, do your job, take care of the finances, take care of everything that's going on around the house, make sure that this is done, and just deal with it. But that's not reality, because mental illness, it's an illness regardless. You wouldn't tell somebody that is having high blood pressure to the point where they're passing out to just walk it off. Somebody that has diabetes, it's like, severe enough that they're having um, different negative symptoms from that, to just deal with it. Drink some ice water and relax, you're fine.
And the word I like to
Um,
use, vulnerability, like that's a word that
yeah.
guys don't use, don't like align with.
Yeah, I mean, like, and you watch some of these comedies and other things, and it's like you're made fun of. Oh, are you're feeling vulnerable? Oh, you're feeling vulnerable? Oh, okay. It's like, yeah, I am feeling vulnerable. I'm a human being. And so, like, there's nothing wrong with going and talking to somebody about these problems you might be having. Maybe it's depression, maybe it's not, maybe it's anxiety problems. I had a friend, another close friend who I won't name because of HIPAA, even though I don't see him personally as a patient. Like people that know and have heard the story, they'll know who I'm talking about. But we were golfing last year together, and he's like, "So let me ask you some questions about ADHD." And I don't go around diagnosing friends, but I'm like, "Yeah, I think you could probably benefit from some medication." He went and I gave him a referral, and he's getting treated for his ADHD. He's like, "Dude, I should have gone in years ago. My life would be so much different had I gotten medication years ago." This dude's in his 30s, but he never got help,
Well,
you know?
and I can tell you in my own life, like mental illness has been big in my life since I was a kid. Like my
Mhm.
mom had it, my sisters have had it, my mom's family, a lot of her family and sisters, siblings have had it. It's been prevalent in our genetics in our family. And I didn't remember back to when I was a kid. I'd go and read journal entries all the way back to when I was 10, and I'd see things, my mom would physically just beat the shit out of me, right? Like
Hmm.
she and not bad. Like I don't want, because I know my sisters may see this. It's not like she would be mad at us and she'd take out her anger, and that's how it was. But like it would affect us, right? It affected us. But more than that, we were dealing with depression too. Like I love my
That's
mom. She
that's a symptom of depression, though, Alan.
right,
And that,
right.
like, my
It is.
dad did. My dad beat me. I was physically abused by my father. I don't have any grudges. We've sorted it out. But it's
Right.
depression,
Right.
irritability, anger, aggression. That is a symptom of depression.
And
And
that's
so, you're speaking the truth right now.
right. And that's what she did. And like I said, I I I got to tone it back a little bit because I know my sisters will watch this, but my sisters dealt with it too. But it dealt with the anger of my mom. It's not like she was abusive entirely, but she was mean, and she would get mean when she was depressed, when she was angry, and things. But like I dealt with it as a kid. My dad, who I didn't have a close relationship with entirely until I've been an adult, we're really close now. But my dad wasn't like that. My dad's family, they weren't depressed. They didn't deal with that. They were stoic. I mean,
Hmm.
that's the way my dad was, but he wasn't the one that would say, "Come on, son, buck up, do this." My dad had empathy though, and did,
Yeah.
but empathy towards depression was a little differently because he didn't understand it and had a really hard time with it. But it was peers at school that would give me the hard time, that would say, "Come on, dude, buck up, come on, this." So I had a lot of pressure from peers at school because I wasn't the tough guy like other people were. And so as I got older and I got into my older teens and then ultimately into my 20s, like I was still dealing with a lot of this, and I wore my emotions on my sleeve. I was always
Hmm.
emotional, and I would cry a lot in this. And somebody, when I was married for a while, my first marriage, I was married. This, yeah. So I've been married twice, folks, if you're keeping count. But
You hooligan.
but we were having a difficult time, and I was kind of really going through depression at the time, and my doctor prescribed me what was the original drugs from back then? It started with a P. Why
Probably
can't I? But
Prozac.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was Prozac, and I was supposed to take it, so I took it, but I didn't take it seriously. I just like took a few bottles. I'm like, I can do this. Like, I don't need this, and I threw it away because I'm like, I'm religious. If I stick to my religious views, if I pray, if I do this kind of stuff, and also if I would stay positive, I could overcome this myself. I don't need medication. And I grew up with my
Yeah.
mom taking meds, so it was like it was me. That was it. But it wasn't until about 4 years, 5 years ago that I suddenly realized I had some issues. But it wasn't until 3 years ago when things started getting bad in my marriage. Like not bad, like we'd already had some struggles, but when things started really going downhill is when I finally discovered or finally admitted that I needed help. So I've been going to a therapist for 3 years now. I've been taking meds for 3 years now. I've been seeking the help I should for 3 years now because I finally admitted that, okay, fine, it's an issue I've had my whole life. All right, fine, I need help. And I look back and say, if I knew back then what I know now, would my teenage years, my adult life be different? Could my marriages
Probably.
fit? And it probably could have. I don't know how it all would have turned out, but yeah, I sit back and go, holy crap, like what why did I take so long to finally figure it out? But I guess there's nothing wrong. Like I can't go back and change it, but I can certainly say, guess what? I'm addressing it now, and that's a start.
This is what's nuts about it is, so you have 7 domains of health, and people focus primarily on physical, social health. You see a lot of, um, people like looking at financial health. There's all kinds of help books on that and such. Intellectual health through education, but um, one main component of the health domain is emotional health, which is mental health. I mean, like, that's what we're talking about here. And so if you're not addressing all 7 of those health domains, you're never going to be a whole person. And so, when you say I mean, like when I was telling the story of my brother, had I known then than what I know now, would things be different? Maybe. But the important thing is that, doing things like this and hopefully, getting an audience and having people see things like this and understand and maybe there will be something that resonates with you where you're like, well, shit, I've had problems where I'm feeling just irritable all the time, or I'm feeling, stressed all the time. Maybe I should go talk to somebody and help that part of your life. Like all of the wealth and all of the social, environment, friends, whatever, it's nice to have, but if you don't have that aspect of your life well, you're not a whole person. So it's extremely important for people to realize that your mental health is a part of your health, period. And I would argue, and I've said this to many people over the years, that I believe that your mental health is more important than your physical health. They're both connected,
Yeah.
but I think that it's more you're more likely to have um a, if you have poor physical health, then you won't necessarily have poor mental health. Like there's people that where they just, they cope well with it. Of course it can decline with it. But I would argue that if you have really poor mental health, your physical health absolutely will decline. Guaranteed.
Yeah.
And that's all there is to it. From one way or another, whether or not it's you know, n- isolating yourself to the point where you're not doing things, you're not physically active, eating your feelings, um, self-medicating, that we kind of mentioned before we started um, recording. Um, Self-medicating is one of the most common things, particularly with alcohol, where it's celebrated in our society. There's plenty of people out there that struggle greatly with it. Nobody ever questions it because, like, oh yeah, he's just a drinker. No, like you've got some other things going on. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing that. You know. So it is extremely important to take care of that aspect of your health.
Well, that's one thing I've learned in the last 3 years of my journey too is, addiction is a symptom of a greater problem,
Hmm.
so we speak of things like alcoholism, like drugs and otherwise. Like, there's so many addictions, even eating disorders, there's addictions involved there and stuff,
Yeah,
but
there is a
they're all
food
symptoms of
addiction.
yeah, there's they're all symptoms of a greater problem that generally is mental health related, and
Hmm.
as I've talked with my therapist about it, it's these addictions and options become a way we cope with, like you said,
Hmm.
self-medicate. We cope with our problems, whether it be anxiety, whether it be depression, whether it be, whatever it may be. And it so the idea is to try and find something healthy to replace it with. And the one thing he described to me is he had me make this list of these coping skills I could create. But he also said you got to have a balance of it, because he says
Oh
it's
yeah.
very easy to replace one addiction with another. And you could replace one addiction with, say, a music addiction, and before you know it, you'll be addicted to music, and it might not be a good form. You might end up in some dark music that suddenly you're back into that
Oh yeah,
cycle.
it's true.
So you
But
have
even
to
so, like if you don't have that balance and you become obsessed and addicted to any one thing,
yeah.
then in all likelihood, then you'll isolate and you'll find yourself like exercise is great, but there are people that are addicted to exercise. They
You have
spend hours and hours a day at the gym and they're like, man, I look fit. Okay, but what are you doing besides that? You know what I mean?
hmm
Like this is coming from a guy that is a little bit, you know, heavy on the sides, but I wear I wear it fairly well. I just like I like to have that balance, like you're mentioning, with you know spreading yourself out and finding different things that you're interested in, and doing those different things. You can't be just a one trick pony or a
Right.
one note song. So
Yeah. And I don't know. I don't know. That's kind of where I've been at, and I like what you mentioned earlier about speaking openly about it. There's the one thing we haven't brought up is when I've looked out at sports specifically too, because you and I share a common bond in sports. As do a lot of
hmm
people watch this. Like a lot of people have this common bond in sports, but we see out there that in the sports world, there's a lot of people that are just like tough it up, like, okay, I don't like doing this because I hate him and I don't want people to see oh, you hate him. This is why. But Draymond Green to me is an example of what the opposite of what you should be when it comes to mental health, because I love that he's a competitor, but sometimes I think he's a little harsh on people who feel and whatnot. And he's just a
yeah,
bad example. I'm just sharing though that there are athletes out there that not necessarily him, but that will frown very much on openly talking about mental illness, depression, how they're feeling. Um, Guys on the opposite end of the spectrum, like Kevin Love, DeMar DeRozan, you've had other guys that have come out that have talked about. In fact, Kevin Love's been doing a ton of work on the
hmm
mental health side, and on pushing to end the stigma and stuff, fight the stigma. And I just love it. I wish there would more athletes that would do that, especially in the football world
I
for
mean,
that.
like you have other athletes like Serena Williams, Michael Phelps talked a lot about it.
Yeah.
Um, oh my gosh, I feel like such a jerk. Simone Biles,
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
huge during the last Olympics. So like having all these athletes that are speaking out, it's incredible, and I think that it does help. But it's like bringing up Draymond Green, like
I can't help it. I don't like him, but it's like it's taking the dislike out of it. It's not so much that he's a bad example, but that I'm using. But there are players out there in all sports that it's tough, and I can't show my emotions like that out on the floor, and I can't do that because I shouldn't. And anybody else that does, to me, is showing weakness, and weakness is not going to win you championships. It's not going to do this, and that's not the right attitude.
yeah.
Like,
I just it is a great thing. Like we kind of talked about toward the beginning that there is a shift and it's good. But I think the important thing just to go back to the whole men's health thing, we got to watch out for each other. Like you said, you had a lot of people reaching out to you and looking out for you when you were struggling with your mental health. But it's also important that we just recognize it. You know what I mean? Like when you're talking to your friends that you do have and checking in with them, if your buddy's being a dick, ask about it. Like, especially if it's not normal for them.
right,
Don't just write it off. Be like, dude, why are you being like that? That's not cool. You
right.
know what I mean? Like they might be struggling with some mental health problems or other problems for that matter. Especially if you've been friends for a long time. Just try not to take it to heart too much. Like maybe set it to the side and come back to it. But
Well,
chances are that your buddy's got some problems going on. You should check in with them.
and that's the key. Like, so eh, I've been keeping kind of in close, like on social media. I watch NAMI, the National
hmm
Association of Medical for
Mental illness.
illness, and then
Yeah.
also AFSP, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. I kind
hmm
of watch what they do and what they share. And I think, is on Instagram. I saw one time they said, ask the tough question, and the tough question they said is, if you see someone struggling, you go up and say, have you considered suicide? Like, are you thinking about suicide? Have you had
That is
suicidal?
one of the toughest things for people. And I'll
Yeah.
be honest with you, like it's just second nature for me. Um, but I'll see it sometimes even now when I have a student that I'm working with and they're going through and I'm watching them and they're completing an assessment on a patient. And every once in a while, I'll get a student and they ask that and they're kind of timid about it because it's not a comfortable thing to ask somebody.
Oh,
Like now, I'll ask anybody, but I've gone to the point in life where I'm 40 years old. I don't give a shit. I've lived half of my life at least already. I'll ask anybody anything. You're not going to hurt my feelings. But it is an uncomfortable thing to do because, you know, suicide is such a nasty, negative thing
yeah,
that nobody really wants to talk about. And everybody has their own opinion about it and their own thoughts and their own feelings about it. Um, but it's if it's something that you can ask somebody, even if you're not asking them that directly, just you know, asking around and be like, are you any thoughts about hurting yourself?
yeah.
You don't have to use the suicide word,
No.
you know.
Well, and it's
Um,
I'll tell my story. This is I have some people know, and I've kind of was been open. I mean, I'm pretty open on Twitter about my struggles, and I sometimes I question that, but I've had everybody, like so many people, tell me, Alan, keep doing it because you actually we enjoy seeing it, and a lot of people are like, Alan, you're an inspiration because I can talk about things. But one experience I had back in February or March was a particular day where I was really having a rough day, and I'd had a fight with my ex, and we weren't divorced yet, but we'd been having a fight, and I went up to this spot where I had been going most of the time, and it's up on 89, and there's a viaduct there, and I started
mhm,
pacing the viaduct, and I would stop in front of it, and I was bawling. I was just losing it emotionally, and for just a few moments I thought, nah, you know what, I can just jump and it'll all be over. And I was scared. I was scared. Like I wasn't sure I wanted to do it anyway, but I didn't, and I walked away. But I'll never forget, this lady must have been driving by and saw me because she called the police, and the police showed
mhm,
up later, and they came over to the door and had me open the door of the car. And the very first question they said is, "How are you doing?" And I go, and I'm still bawling. I'm like, "I'm okay." And the immediate question he says, have you considered harming yourself? Have you considered, have you considered suicide? He goes, I have to ask these questions, but I want to know, have you? And I'm like, you know, I had to say yes, because I had to say yes. So I was like, yes. Next thing I know, they're asking me if I will hop in the car and take a ride. And they took me to the hospital, where I spent 5 hours at the hospital talking to a social worker. And
mhm.
I probably should have spent all night. I probably should have spent all the time I could there until I was better. But that 5 hours was a long 5 hours, and it was like, holy crap, what am I doing here? But they ask the tough questions, and of course they have to because it's their job. But it's the questions we need to ask too, and not wait until a police officer has to ask it. We should be able to ask those same questions and talk to people and ask the hard things of them, like, what's going on? Are you okay? Like, and not everybody's going to say, yeah, I'm okay, or no, I'm not.
Yeah.
But
The hardest
sometimes,
part with that is, you know, let's say that you ask, you know, Timmy Thompson and he says, "Yeah, I'm thinking about killing myself." What do you do with that information? You know what I mean? I think that's the hardest part that people have. So I'll tell you what you do. There's a couple of things. You yourself can go to that person and sit with them. You can call somebody else and have them go and see that person and sit with that person. Or it is completely within reason for you to call the emergency line, call 911, and have them do a welfare check. You can also there's the when did it start?
the 988
The 988. I think it was like
was July.
July or
Yeah,
yeah.
it's July.
You can also encourage them to call 988 and get a hold of somebody. I think it's more meaningful if you do the first and
Yeah,
then at least like if it gets to the point where they're not feeling safe and they're still having thoughts of suicide, then you can at least be there with them when you call 911 and say, like, we need to get this person in, because there are in the Salt Lake Valley, there are two psych emergency rooms, one at LDS Hospital, one at the University of Utah at Uni or Huntsman Mental Health Institute now,
Mhm.
where you can go and do an overnight or whatever to keep you safe. And generally speaking, they will get you connected to mental health services when you go in there. And any emergency room that you go to, they should get you connected to mental health services. And then, you're going to be evaluated by a therapist, and they may determine that you could benefit from a hospital stay, going to one of the numerous psychiatric hospitals in the valley. But either way, I mean, your life matters. It really does. And people don't know how much their life matters until they're gone. I'll tell, when my brother died by suicide in 2010, there was, like, we didn't know this because we were inside, but the director came in afterward and he said that from the time that the viewing started till, shortly before it was time to end, there was a line wrapped around the building for him. And I don't think that he could probably even fathom that there would be that many people showing up. So that's how many people were impacted. And then when we had his funeral service, we had it at my parents' church, and the entire building was full, and there were people out in the halls, like stacked up in the halls, to go and be a part of his funeral service. You just, like, people have no idea how important their life is and how much they impact people until they're gone. So get the help that you need. That's all I'm trying to say.
And that's like that's what it is getting help, because you're right, they don't know the amount of people there. Like, even in John's case, I think at his celebration of life, I want to say there was at least 150 people there, and a lot of them were family and friends. That doesn't count the Twitter world, and there were hundreds
Mhm.
of people on Twitter that were affected by him. But the one thing I'll say is, like, when you're in those dark moments, like, you don't think about all of that. That
Yeah,
doesn't hit you.
absolutely.
So you're stuck. And so that's when, and I've called that hotline number. I'm glad they went 988 now, because I don't have to remember the
Trying
number
to
anymore.
remember what was the
Yeah,
prevention helpline again?
but it's like, I've called that line before, and a lady talked me down from self-harm, and she just talked to me for a while, and she just listened. Like, and the nice part about that, it was anonymous. I wasn't talking to anybody that knew my
Yeah.
circumstance. I wasn't talking to anybody that is family or friends. I was talking to somebody who didn't know a single thing about me,
Mhm.
and they were just going to listen and talk me through it. And it was one of the coolest experiences. But I have a list a mile long with that number, the police department number, the Huntsman number on it, um, and then a whole bunch of friends and family, yourself included, that are on this list of people that I know I can text or call if I'm having a rough time. And I
Yeah.
use it. I use it. I don't, sometimes I go to the same people, but sometimes not. I use it because I know I can reach out to people.
Well, I'm glad
And
I'm
so
on that
that's,
list.
yes, you're on that list. But that's the point I want to make on this show, like, that I do when I do this every I try and do it once a week or every couple of weeks, but and tonight is you recognize when you need some help and reach out. And then when everybody says reach out if you're struggling, but that also goes on the people that aren't struggling. If you see somebody that is struggling, or if you know that somebody's legit having a tough time, even they try and hide it, then don't wait for them to reach out, because we can't always reach out when we're in those moments. So you have to reach out. You have to recognize it and reach out. It takes both parties sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, it's good. Good stuff.
So, all right, we've been talking a long time. Um, I we could go on forever. You and I could talk forever, and
Yeah,
I
when we when we first started coming together with doing this. It's like we said, we could just go on for hours and hours, but
Yeah. Well, and I could, but we're gonna have to cut this short. But I want to thank you for coming on and being with me and talking.
absolutely.
Mental health matters to me right now, and I'll put this lastly is that I've been trying to find a purpose right now in my life, and I have my kids and that's a purpose, but I get stuck with things. But one of the things I'm trying to do, and I'll encourage others to do, is I've reached out to AFSP and I've reached out to NAMI, and I'm jumping into their volunteer program, and I'm going to start getting involved in volunteering and being an advocate and trying to do things and get involved more, because it's going to give me a little purpose, and it's going to help me to to involve myself in the community that I'm very passionate about, and hoping to help other people, and not just other people but myself. One of my very dearest friends talked about this thing that I do on YouTube, and she said, even if it only affects my life, guess what? It affected one life.
It's one person.
Yeah.
I'll leave.
So
I'll leave with that. My boss and my teacher, like this man has been incredible. Um, when I first started working in my job now, he yeah, I was kind of struggling because there's a lot of things that I just didn't expect. And he said to me, when you decided to become a nurse practitioner and specialize in psychiatry, how many people did you intend on improving their life? And that's what I said that, hand to God. Well, I would say that if I help at least one person, then I've done some good. And he said, well, you can rest assured because you've definitely helped at least one person. And so I know that you will do the same, Alan. Absolutely. Keep doing what you're doing. This is great stuff.
thanks, man. I appreciate it.
I
And
appreciate you.
thanks everybody for tuning in to to what I'm calling my life unscripted, until somebody tells me that name is taken and I have to change it. We're just going with it. So thanks everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.